hello everyone, Justin Bell here on Drive to Win, brought to you as always by the Wynn Las Vegas in this beautiful Sirius XM studios, right in the heart of the casino actually. People keep walking by, waving as they go. If you are ever in Las Vegas and make your way to the Wynn, please come and join us in the studio and put your head around. So many great shows are taped here every week, including, of course, mine. Well, the first race of a triple header in Italy this weekend took place. I'm going to make a very bad attempt at the full title of the show, of the race. The Formula One AWS Gran Premio Made in Italy, dell'Emilia Romagna 2025, aka the Imola Grand Prix. Well, it was a wonderful race in every single way, and I have perhaps one of my biggest guests ever joining us today, and that is Williams F1 team principal James Vowles. And I have so much to talk to him about. I barely slept last night, kept on adding things on my phone in my notes to talk to him about. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I'm about to. Well, anytime you go to Italy with the passion of the tifosi and the fans out there, it's quite remarkable, and I can only imagine what it was like for Lewis Hamilton being there wearing his red Ferrari race suit. And yeah, their weekend wasn't great in the beginning. On Saturday turned into quite a good Sunday, but also for young Kimi Antonelli. Imagine that, being at home. He was born in Bologna, just a few miles away relatively to the track, brought all his schoolmates along. Now that is a flex, isn't it? Can you imagine? I had nothing like that. Nor did you probably, but if you were in a position to invite all your all your schoolmates to come and watch you race in a Formula One race, I think that's pretty cool. I'm sure he got a date afterwards, but he also managed to get 20 odd Italian school kids into white and silver and black Mercedes shirts. So that was probably even a bigger task, and not Ferrari ones. Anyway, super cool. The top six, Charles Leclerc, we had Albon, we had Hamilton, then Piastri, Norris, and this is quite wild. As I have said 44 times before today on our show, Max Verstappen wins the race. And it was Red Bull's 400th Grand Prix. So all in all, a nice big bow tied on that. So, it was really quite an extraordinary win. We obviously had that incredible first lap. And I had just tuned into the race just a few seconds later than planned. I was just getting home, and I already had a text saying, what about that first corner? I'm thinking, what on earth could they be talking about? So it was quite outstanding. Obviously, Max Verstappen lined up second on the grid behind Oscar Piastri. And his entire win was set into motion by the catalyst that was that overtake into turn one. I just want to sort of put it in perspective and what I felt as a driver gutturally as I watched it. It was a commitment level, the ability to see an opportunity window open up and find your way through it, knowing that if you get it wrong, you're actually probably taking out the other car as well, and definitely damaging what is starting to be a championship run for him as a driver, which didn't look like it at the beginning. And just even talking to some other people, my father, Derek Bell, he said, he's a special boy, isn't he? And then DC on the broadcast said, he was prepared to risk it all. And then Christian Horner just saying it was win it or bin it. So that really does give you an idea of what some of the world's, top drivers and team owners thought about it, because it was outstanding. And in a way, I guess the counterpoint to that is Oscar could have defended and crashed them both, but I think he just was mirrors full of George Russell, pulled a little to the left. And there is a point as a driver, or there is a moment as a driver, that you should respond this way. When someone does such an audacious overtaking maneuver on you, you have to fight the urge on instinct to drive against them. Sometimes you just have to concede. And that's definitely what Oscar had to at that point. I think he was probably like, holy cow, did that just happen? So unfortunately, for McLaren, they were surprised by the pace of the Red Bull over the rest of the race. But definitely they were, for Red Bull, they were able to manage it. And you could see just the pure joy on Max's face afterwards and the way he talked about it. And I think it'll go down as one of his finest drives for sure. But also I was just thinking, What would it mean like in reverse? Would Max have conceded to Oscar? In a way, actually, I think he would have done. I think Oscar Piastri is the only driver on the grid right now that Max gives that level of respect to. Or anyway, the only ones that are up against him. I think obviously Alonso and people he would give that respect to, but they're nowhere near him. So we won't know for the while. So on the flip side of that, I just wanted to bring up accidents and survival. Yuki Tsunoda's accident in Q1 on the lap 1 was epic in the full meaning of the word. He obviously clipped the inside curb, really was aggressive on it. The car, as the suspension sort of unloaded on the right, it caught. He had no chance for opposite lock, and it just flew across the gravel trap into the wall, upside down, bounced around, and the track is obviously a contributing factor to that. It's tight, it's very fast, it's truly old school. There is no, like at Austin, you could do that maneuver and spin out for a couple of miles almost, but not here, and it's so uncompromising. Obviously no more than a street track, quite obviously, but it also is a track with a horrific legacy, and this weekend was, almost the anniversary of Ayrton Senna's, it was an anniversary of Ayrton Senna passing there, and Roland Ratzenberg at the same track on the same weekend. So any crash there makes you hold your breath. But I just quickly want to talk through the accident, because obviously as he did that, he got out of the car on his own. But maybe a few years ago, he would have been another sad statistic of the sport. And there's many reasons for it. You have the composite tubs, you have the energy dissipation as you get into an accident, wheels fall off, suspension breaks. It's all part of shedding the energy load so less gets to the driver ultimately, because there is a limit to what the human body can withstand. And, training, that's why these drivers train so hard. They have amazing neck strength. Also, in his favor, Yuki's a small guy. I mean, George Russell is much more exposed, and I always think about that. But perhaps the biggest thing is obviously the halo. And when it came out, I'm thinking, I get it, but how are they looking through that? And when I've been on a sim, you feel like you're doing this, but you're actually not. Your eyes really do look past it. But it has literally changed Formula One drivers' lives. Romain Grosjean, Verstappen at the British Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton, Zhou Guanyu. Really massive accidents that may have taken 4 of the top players off the board in another life, in another era. And remember, Formula One should never really truly be safe. That takes away the spectacle and the joy of it. But severe injury and death really should not play a part. So man-pushing machine to the edge of physics is what it's all about, and the competition, best drivers against each other. But that ever-present threat of danger is really what makes us watch it in a way. It's like gladiator stuff in the Colosseum. We want to see the fight, and we know that the ultimate price can be paid. Also, motor racing is the only sport that when you turn up on your ticket, it tells you you're acknowledging a waiver by entering. It is a dangerous sport, and you're taking your life into your own hands by even being there. You don't get that at a Tiesto concert, do you? It's definitely a man's game. So anyway, we've got perhaps my final word on that is maybe we're at the perfect moment in time for the sport. Technology, performance, and safety is all together in the 75th year of Formula One, and that's what makes it have just the right amount of danger. Well, Wynn Las Vegas's Ultimate Race Week is back for 2025, and anchored, of course, by the Formula One Heineken Silver Las Vegas Grand Prix, November 20th through November 23rd. From immersive pop-ups and branded takeovers to A-list performances and, of course, thrilling views of the circuit, Wynn Las Vegas puts you in the center of it all. For more information regarding room and ticket packages, you can visit winlasvegas.com. That's winlasvegas.com. Well, let's get into our first guest, our only guest, James Vowles, British motorsport engineer, team principal now of Williams Racing. He was motorsports strategy director at Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team, and also with Braun GP back in the day, a very big part of their championship 2009 winning season. He's worked in Formula One for over 20 years, and amazing mentors, David Richard, Ross Brawn, Toto Wolff, and he's played a key role in 9 Constructors' Championship and 8 Drivers' Championships and over 100 Grand Prix wins. And now, of course, he's really leading the charge, bringing the legendary, iconic Williams team back to the front, sharp end of the grid. Well, it's a real honor to get James on the show. So, James, Welcome to Drive To Win. How are you, mate?
It's a fantastic podcast name, by the way.
It is, right? I know. Well, seeing as I'm inside the Wynn Casino, it was like, well, for the purposes of sponsorship, I'll do WYNN. But if it all goes wrong, it can become WIN in a heartbeat.
There we go.
Well, listen, thanks so much for joining. I know the middle week of a triple header, I must just be so busy. I can't even fathom the workload. But let's quickly jump in about the last weekend. I mean, it really was a great weekend from a spectator's point of view. And it was fun, James, because I was watching it. Very seldom do I get to watch a race from a team's perspective. But knowing you were coming on, I was, all Williams all weekend. Yet you described the weekend as a bit of a disappointment at the end. Have you reflected on that? Are you still feeling that way?
It's strange, isn't it? And I don't want to come across as undesiring where we are at the moment. I'm really proud of the team, really proud of the steps we've made, really happy with the journey that we're on. So those are all the positives. But my job in all of this is to make sure that we feel pain when we don't get everything at the weekend that we could have got. And we didn't in this particular circumstance. With Carlos, we rolled the strategy dice and it was the wrong number that came up. And in the case of Alex, I think he had a fourth place in there. Brilliant to watch him race. I'm glad we got to race really against Ferrari, but we didn't quite walk away with every prize that was available to us. So what I'm just trying to do now is our expectations are not just to score points, but to properly score points and fight giants. And we didn't quite get it all right on the weekend.
Yeah, what a great way of putting it. Fighting giants. It is, because I'm sitting there and actually, you met my father, Derek Bell. He's called me in the middle of the race, was texting me in the race, and he went, can you believe we're even saying Williams overtaking Ferrari, Williams overtaking Mercedes? Those words haven't really been said in a couple of decades. And what a journey you've taken the team on. Well, as a team effort, obviously.
It's exactly that. I mean, I'd always say this. It is never one individual. My job is just to bring the right people together and point us the right way. But I am so pleased that we are pulling together as the entity we are. And you're spot on in your analogy. It's why I don't want to come off as even rude potentially in the circumstance, saying we want more. But that's what happens. You know this himself from when you're racing at that as well. It's that, the first step of it is win the points. Great, that's fantastic. The next step is 2 cars win the points. Brilliant. And then you want more. And then that becomes the de facto standard that you want every weekend. And your eyes are now opening. And it nearly happened in this race. And I think that's really the feeling that you get, that maybe a podium is possible if everything really falls our way. Now, we're not there yet. We're not there on performance yet. But the point behind it is that it's one of these lovely goals that's on a shelf that we can't quite reach at the moment, but we can see it. And that wasn't the case 12 months ago.
No, and it does, as you say, raises the platform, and you see it in the faces of the baseline. You see it in the faces of the drivers, don't you? Just to break in the top 10, you're all celebrating, and then top 6, and then right there. And yeah, I often say to people who haven't been in a competitive sport, until you understand the mindset of a competitor, we reset on a Monday to do better on the Sunday. I think that's what's so unique about sportsmen, and I can only relate to the racing side. But was that how it felt when you got back to the factory on Monday? Everybody was buoyed by where you got, but just aggressively ready to take on this weekend.
You summarized it perfectly. The reason why I fell in love with sport and have made it my life really fundamentally is that you're surrounded by, in the case of here in Williams, 1,100 people that are all as competitive as you are, all driven by one goal, which is to move this organization up into a championship position. And it is such a lovely feeling when you're surrounded by peers that have exactly the same thought process, the same way of dealing with problems that you do. So that's the first thing to point into that. And exactly to your point, the rate at which you reset is different in the sport. So actually drivers, when they're out there on track, as you know, they reset after just one corner, a few seconds after a poor corner, reset, get back into it. And our reset time is that weekend's over, and it's fantastic. We score points. Monaco, though, is the priority. Monaco is the priority for us to make sure that we're on top of now, and that's where we've got to put our focus. And it's almost a very small window of celebration followed by a tremendous amount of hard work. But it's why I fell in love with the sport, because you're sort of back into it every few days.
That's why I think the guy that wins, the team that wins the last race of a championship, they're the lucky ones, because you got the whole winter to be a winner. You feel pretty good, don't you?
Yeah, you're spot on. You're absolutely spot on.
Well, let's jump into the race a little bit, because I mean, I know just to even be in your position, you're such a race fan, as is everyone in the team, up and down the pit lane. But you're so absorbed in what you're doing up on the pit wall there that I'm sure you don't have. You're just focusing on your cars. But you obviously saw at the start what Max did, whistling around the outside there. Do you just take a mental note of, holy crap, that's actually very good, and then go back to your cars? I mean, do you have any minute to reflect on what else is going on?
Yeah, you do. You definitely do. It's worth pointing out, I'm not sure this is a good or a bad thing, that you're very focused in and around the region that you're racing. So, for example, I couldn't unfortunately tell you what happened from P14 down. I would have been able to a year ago because we were in that sort of mix, but you kind of focus in the region you are. And fortunately, Max is close enough that I can spend a bit of time observing it. And to your point, bloody hell, that was impressive. But it's literally for a moment, and then you go straight back into, have we got damage? Is everything okay? Is everything, are both front wings connected? Do we have any tire pressure? So effectively all the normal things that we'll be looking at in the data following that first lap, just to make sure we've come out of it unscathed. And then we're into, what's this race going to look like? Because it's a world of unknown for us. Normally not. Normally we've got quite a bit of data that really gives us a really good idea of what's happening. But in Imola, as you saw really with how everything panned out, just not a lot of data. So it was just keeping an eye on what's going on every single facet of the car.
Yeah, I was thinking about that from your point of view as well. You know, you're 10 laps in, you're still running 6th and 7th. At that point, without knowing the jeopardy, if you like, of the, VSC coming up and things, you're no way to predict that. What are you focusing on at that point? Because it's settled, right? You've got probably good feedback from the drivers about the tires and tire deg and everything. But what is the information coming to you? What are you focusing on at that moment?
So the modern day Formula One cars have about 50 to 70,000 channels of data coming in live. And we're able to see that whether we're here back in the UK, so we have a team back in the UK, about 30 to 50 people looking at that data live, or whether we're at the track, obviously, where we have a contingent 16 engineers or so pouring through that, and our mechanics trackside as well. And the reason why I give you that quantum of data is that what you can probably see from that is if you took one tire, there's around about 200, 300 channels of data just focused on one tire. So you can get lost in the world of data if you're not too careful. Yeah. Now, fortunately, I have a team of really good individuals who are doing that. And their job is actually just to feed up high level, this is where we are. So a lot of what you're doing across those first few laps of the race is gaining a baseline understanding as to where we are on fuel, reliability systems, tire performance, strategy. And it's a high level communication to what we call the pit wall, which is that wall that's outside. But really, that doesn't actually mean anything anymore. The pit wall is wider reaching than that. The reason why I bring that to everyone's attention is because my job in that is just keeping heartbeat on what's going on. And hopefully I don't really say much during the course of the race, because if I am, I'm trying to course correct things that I have to be careful not to interfere too much, because I have really strong individuals who are empowered and I don't want to take away that empowerment. That said, I'm a racer, so it's hard for me not to say anything, particularly during the race whatsoever at all. So the way I've tried to describe it elsewhere is when you go bowling with a 4-year-old, you put up these sort of buffers on the sides so they can't put it in the gutter. And the way I see my job is I'm kind of those buffers to make sure if I see something going towards a gutter, just bounce it back off. And you do that using questions. You do that. Have you thought about this? Have you seen this? What's going on with that? So that you're still leaving everyone empowered, but ensuring that they have visibility of items that you think are important for them to do.
Yeah, I can only imagine it's like in the team principal role, especially with your engineering background. It's a bit, I remember talking to Rick Hendrick once about how do you do it with the dealerships? How do you do it with 180 dealerships and the race team and things? And he's an impressive man. You might have met him. But he said, by the time it gets to me, it's a real problem. I have these brilliant people. So by the time I hear about it, it's requiring action. And I'm sure that it's probably pretty similar in what you're doing. So you came in a little bit earlier than planned, just after lap 12. And it was a good pit stop. But it made me think about pit stops really aren't dependent on budget, are they? The bigger teams with more money or the smaller teams with more money? It's your group of guys and girls doing what they need to do under that pressure. And you actually had a much better pit stop than Oscar did at that point. Can you just give me an insight into how you time and motion and how you analyze a pit stop? Because we see the finished result, but I'm sure a ton of work goes into it.
Yeah, definitely. So the first one is this: we're still constrained in a cost cap, whatever happens. So if, for example, we want to introduce new pit stop guns, and I'll go through what those cost in a minute, but it's eye-watering. That takes away performance from the car. So it's this continuum balance. I've only given the example of pit stop equipment here, between what we spend on all the different parts of it, and ultimately whether you add a millisecond to the car on track or whether you add a couple of milliseconds in the pit stop. What we can do that's really what I consider free is what you've just described. So time and motion. So generally speaking, our crew will be back here in the UK, not during the triple header, but between most races, practicing here with both the rig that we've developed, which is effectively, think about a wheel that's moving in air in the direction towards you. You're sat on the ground on your knees as you would be normally. There's 3 people. You do the full motion of connect the gun, take the wheel off, put the wheel on, but it's simulating the car coming in. It's just one wheel of it rather than the entire car. They'll do hundreds of those in between. We'll then do what I think is more valuable practice, which is really another vehicle being either pushed or driven in, which is, again, it's not coming in at near motorway speeds now, but it is coming in reasonably quick. And again, practice that time motion. Everything has data attached to it. So the guns have data, there's video being captured at the same time, because you wrap data around it in order to find your patterns and your optimizations. The crew did a winter training camp, and they train physically with someone that travels around the world with them every single weekend on and off. But a lot of it, so this is all great, that sort of preparation, practice, a lot of it is about creating the right mental space for them as well to make sure that they can perform under immense pressure on the day. Because a pit stop is, give or take, for the wheel change, 1.8 seconds. And a lot happens in 1.8 seconds. So if I give you the bits that blow my mind, the car's coming in at 80 kilometers an hour. It's especially in Imola, the pit boxes are very narrow, so it turns towards you. Your knees are on the ground as far as you're going, with the front wing pointing towards you for admittedly half a second, but it's still half a second. And even when it's passing by you, you're still doing 40 kilometers an hour before it comes to a stop. Where it comes to a stop can vary by 20 centimeters, something in that ballpark. It's asking a driver to really try and stop on a dime. Hard to do that when it's bumpy, when there's different conditions, when they come in a little bit quick. The gunman should be connecting the gun inside the wheel before the car has stopped. And if they feel good connection, pulling the trigger. So that's your sequence of events that starts happening. Ideally, before the car's even stationary, you're doing a trigger pull. The nut itself only comes off in about 0.2 of a second. It's these guns are immense, and they are a couple hundred thousand, not because of the gun technology. It's not that exciting. It's pneumatic, but with the amount of technology we bed into the guns to understand how it's connected to the nut, which way it's rotating, how fast.
Did you say 200,000?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? That's why I left it till then, just to add in conversation.
Slid it in.
Just slid it in. But it's we appreciate it's extraordinary, but that's the fight we're in. Because at the moment in the pit lane, if you can find 1/10 or 0.2 on your adversaries, or have the confidence that the wheel is 100% done up before leaving, that's performance and that's points. Simple as that. So the gunman goes through, does their work, the wheel changeover. They're trying to effectively enact what they always do in practice, but move the wheels from the point of nut loose, but within millimeters of each other. So in other words, you can't wait to react until you see the wheels clear of the axle. You've got to react before that point, otherwise you're slow. The jacks drop automatically based on guns, and then the light goes green based on everything being safe to go. So what you're trying to do there is get rid of as many human reaction times as possible. And that all happens in 1.8 seconds. And it sounds perhaps even slow when you hear it that way, but you watch it in person and you struggle to believe that's just happened. It's this symphony when it all happens together at the same time.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy looking down on it when they have a camera shot from above. And I've never actually seen it in slow motion like you guys do, but it must be fascinating. Well, thanks for sharing that, because we see it every weekend and I know a lot's going on. And when you think at sports cars with our fuel stops and things, we did a driver change and everything in 28 seconds and fuel and tires, and we thought we were kicking ass, and we weren't really.
It's funny you bring that up. So I nothing like your accolade, Justin, but I've done GT3 endurance racing, and the first time we did a driver change, was about 46 seconds, I think. And we were trying. I promise you, we
Yeah.
were trying. And by the race, we got it down to, I think it was 11 seconds is where we got to in the end. But basically, you're physically ripped out the car as soon as you stop. But it's a really good example of time motion study. What you're talking about in a sports car is no different. Yes, it's a different sequence of events. You've got to wait to do things in a serial process, but you've optimized that down through practice, trial and error in order to get it down. Because in the pit lane, again, a half a second will make the difference between winning or losing. And that's what I enjoy about our sport. You take a problem and you just optimize it, and everyone else has optimized it their own way. And it's a race to see who's got it best.
Yeah, it is. Everyone's done it in their own way. That's so fun. Are you still doing any racing sometimes?
Yeah, no, I haven't had time. I was about to say yes, but I'm trying to see what we can do and what we can fit in. The reality behind it is it's going to have to be in the off season.
Yeah.
As you know, it's addictive. That's the problem. So let's see.
Yeah, just ask Zach, right? He can't get out of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the middle of one point in the race, obviously, Albon's running up in third, and you had Carlos come in a little bit earlier. Obviously, that was a deliberate decision on the tires. But again, you see it now. Williams is in third place, and I know it's with pit rotations and things. But again, back down to that data and algorithm and strategy, you must be exploring every tangent you can that you could maintain that position up at the front as best as you can, including the pit stop. So how many options did you have at that point?
So strategically, the teams are running probably at that point in the race tens of thousands of simulations to sort of determine what we can and can't do. Now, in reality, your options are pretty limited. You have to stop at some point. We have to run both tire compounds, and with Alex, he was on a one stop. And by definition, the window where that can happen is not tremendously wide, because each tire, you basically use it for every lap that you're doing. Every time you accelerate through a corner, you're laying down rubber on the ground. That's why the tarmac actually becomes darker and darker in the braking zones and the traction zones. We are literally depositing rubber on the ground. So you are going to run out of it at some point, and that's a finite lap, which we use various tools and systems to allow us to calculate where that's going to. So what you're now looking at is actually what happens in case of accident VSC, safety car. Are we going to lose out on different circumstances? And of course, in Imola, that actually transpired to be one of the major drivers for everyone. But you're relying on simulation tools, but for clarity, it's still human beings that are making the decisions, because it is not at the point where all of the information is in the simulation tool.
Okay. Because I was thinking, it was funny, you used the gambling analogy at the beginning in something you said, and I literally wrote down in my notes, you must have felt like you were playing a hand in poker and got the lucky next card, because when that VSC happened, it was just perfectly positioned for you, and you cannot premeditate that. So at that point, you must be pretty happy you had the split strategy.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, very happy with Alex. I think we did the right thing. With Carlos, even by that point, we can actually see what happened to the tires. So explaining what happened, between lap 9 to about lap 13, 6 drivers came on. Carlos was one of them as well, and just said, these tires do not feel good whatsoever at all. I think the degradation is very, very high, and indeed backed up by the fact that lap times were going off at quite a significant rate. And to explain why to all of our audiences, these tires we brought there are the softest tires we've had anywhere, and brilliant. Does a great qualifying lap, made things very tricky for us, but we were unsure whether or not they would basically fall apart in the race. And all the evidence was it looked like it's being damaged, looked like it was just struggling under the load of doing the racing. Now, actually, what really happened is it was bad for about 5 laps, then cleared up, and actually was not too bad beyond that point. But the decision was done. We stopped early on it. By the time we went longer with Alex, it became very clear with Carlos that we'd gone the wrong way, as had half the grid, to be transparent. I think all teams near enough split their cars, but irrespective by that point. But what I'm pleased about was it would have been very easy, and I think one team did this, to fall into the camp of stopping both. And we didn't. The team stayed really true to, no, we are going to make sure that we don't know what's going to happen. Let's keep one on this and see what happens. And Alex did an absolutely brilliant job. For that matter, Carlos did too. He fought back through. I can't remember how many overtakes he did, but fought back up into that points position. But I was happy that we had Alex out there for that VSC, because it, as you said, couldn't have fallen better. And to explain why, again, the VSCs mean everyone on track is running much slower than they normally do, but the pit lane still runs at normal speed. So your pit stops reduced by quite a large chunk, by over 10 seconds, I think, in this case.
Yeah, yeah. No, one of the things I think that might actually also come from your leadership, the way you respond on the pit wall and the engineers. But your drivers really do give concise, accurate, not unemotional, because that would not make them drivers, but your radio communications are not the theater that we see in some of the other cars and some of the other drivers that I think should know better. Is that a bit of a culture you're trying to evolve, between them? Because it doesn't help when they're just saying the car's shit. You're like, well, that doesn't help me, right? When you're sitting on the pit wall. So that communication style, do you work on that with those guys?
Yes. Short answer, yes. And I'm also fortunate that it's also natural selection. To a certain extent, the reason why we wanted Carlos here and Alex here is because they are very calm under that pressure and duress and have really good communication skills. But actually what we're trying to embed is that should be across the organization. Every single individual should be incredibly calm in that high pressured situation. And it doesn't help to communicate how you're feeling towards it. What helps is we're here to win and lose together, to resolve any problems we have together, which means it's one team. But I don't know how you felt on this, Justin, but I'm a very amateur driver, so bear with me on this one. You feel incredibly alone in the car. That's the best way I'll ever put it to you. And the voice on the radio becomes this lifeline to a world beyond yours. And so if you use it wisely and use it in the right way, you have the cooperation of a whole team that wants to support you in what you're doing. And the driver absolutely has that power. And so now that you put it into those terms, that power is incredible and it's in your hands. Use it wisely.
Yeah, and also reverse motivation. It does go the other way when sometimes we saw it a little bit with Lewis, with his new engineer at Ferrari. The communication was so bad, it came across so rude from both ways. And that doesn't help anybody, including your mechanics standing there, right, ready to do a 1.8 pit stop. Everybody needs to feel there's synergy in the team. But the other thing, James, that people can't understand unless they've put the helmet on like you and I have, is the intense pressure in the cockpit is something that we cannot understand unless you've been through it. And I think that's sometimes unfair in the way some of the journalists report it, the way the FIA report it, but it is an intense situation. For example, you had Albon was in a Ferrari sandwich, right, towards the end of the race, and which looked spectacular. But how was his feedback at that point? What were you saying to him?
The main thing is, so just prior to that, he was effectively in a situation where we know, correct as far as sounds the way of doing it, but we knew we should have the pace on us to get Leclerc. His first feedback was actually incredibly determined, incredibly focused. I am going to get this car. Our feedback to him was a little bit more positive than that. There was a podium in front of you, because Piastri was on very old tires at that point in time as well. A little bit enthusiastic of us, perhaps, but it is always good to be forward thinking. The job of Alex is, those are two drivers that I know and I believe and we trust that you can race. So as a result of that, you have the whole backing of the team to go out there and chase a podium. And that's what he did. The move he did on Charles, I think, was brilliant.
Yeah.
I quite like racing. I'm here to go racing. So the fact that there was a contact and an off, it's a pain in the ass. Yes, we lost out as a result of it, but we're a sport. We got to remember that at the end of the day. And I don't feel too much hardship towards that. But I like that Alex went out there and fought for those positions, because that's what we should be doing.
You see the data between the drivers, and it's something, you say the driver in the car is alone. You really are. But the data, it lays you wide open, right? In the old days, as Dad said, you could go off at Le Mans and the guy, as you came past the pits, they'd be like on their primitive radio, what happened? You lost 6 seconds. And you'd say, traffic? The fact you'd spun, no one knew. Now they only have to clench their butt cheeks and you've got it on data. So everything. But when you overlay them, I'm not asking for trade secrets. I'm just saying I know what the data looks like between comparing myself to another driver, as do you. What are their inherent different qualities around one lap? Where do you go, ooh, that I can see that's a Alex corner and that's a Carlos corner? What do you see through that? What as personalities almost through their data trace?
I get it entirely. The funny story with your dad, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but it's a great thing. For clarity for your listeners, we cannot measure their butt cheek clenching yet, but I will add that to the list of sensors. Just write it down now. There we go. So here's Alex and Carlos are actually very similar in terms of driving style, which works really well for us. Alex, and this you saw beginning of the season more than anything else, Alex probably learned how to drive around a few of the car characteristics that we have. So the car's still quick, but it does have some pretty horrible characteristics in some circumstances. And that was really the differentiator between the two. You'd see Alex taking a different line, for example, Melbourne Turn 3 than Carlos. And it was only in qualifying that really it came to fruition as to why. It's because there's a characteristic that picks up with a bit of crosswind through that, for example. I'm going to some very minor details, but the biggest thing is this. Carlos is really good at combining on the front. So what I mean by that is holding the brake pressure and then turning into the corner and really maximizing the lateral and longitudinal grip of the tire to get to the apex, but maximize the entry speed. A little bit more so than Alex, probably, if I had to look at anything in terms of driving style whatsoever at all. But when I say they're similar, if I brought up their traces, you'd be hard-pressed to find the differences between the two here. They both like a little bit more understeer than they do oversteer. They can cope with a neutral car, but they just prefer it slightly more on the understeer side, which is absolutely fine. That's probably most drivers I know of that are in that category and camp. With Alex, he's developed quite a few different ways of driving around the problems. So might be using the rear axle a little bit more to rotate the car, which is not great for the tires, but a good way of rotating the car than Carlos. But my opinion is what I've been watching over the last 6-7 races is Carlos is migrating towards that style because that's how you get the most out of the Williams. So there isn't a lot between them. And just to justify that, though, most of the time in qualifying, there's now hundreds between them. So it doesn't surprise me either, given that they're near enough overlaying in times a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, and you watch their off-track relationship. You watch, and we've seen social media now. We see much more of the relationships between the drivers. But as you know, drivers have always had good and bad relationships. You can't expect to compete against people at any sporting level and not have some conflict. But your guys seem very, synergistic, and I think that's definitely a contributing factor towards the team heading in this positive direction.
I would 100% agree. I think what Carlos and Alex did in Saudi is the teamwork and the definition of teamwork. It is working together for the good of the team. In Saudi Arabia, in Miami, and just on Miami very briefly, what an event it is absolutely fantastic to see. And it is great to see just how we've got 3 crown jewel races within the US market. And it is absolutely brilliant to see how not just we as Formula One, but we as Williams as well are sort of being picked up as teams that are being celebrated there. And it feels great. Really, really great now when we go to America, and it feels like home. I suppose the best way I can put it to you. But again, in Miami, we had 2 teams. Carlos was a bit disappointed, but ultimately they would have paid, and they did play the team game for what we needed to be doing at the time. Carlos's car was damaged, and they worked together as best as possible. And there's a flow of feedback between the two of them that is really healthy at all points, whether it's post-race, post-qualifying, pre-qualifying. This is what I found. Have a look at this. This is my setup. I'm thinking about this. What are you thinking about? It is not about hiding information. It's about sharing for the greater good of the team as we move forward.
Yeah. Just for fun, if you had to use 3 words to describe each of them, what would they be?
Alex, hilarious, focused when the helmet is on. I know it's not 3 words, but the focus is the word I'd use. And this year, driven. Like I've never seen him before. He's absolutely here to pick up everything he can pick up along the way, and no one will stand in his way. And I love it about him. With Carlos, intelligent, so clever at finding details in the car, in the data, and how to work with all others in order to extract it. Teamwork. He's been vital in bringing parts of our organization together. He comes here to the factory and will spend an hour with aerodynamics, just going through little bits of details of some of the data and saying, this is what I felt here, this is what happened. If we look at the data, you can see this is going on here. So it's this really good linking between what's happening in the car and what's happening afterwards in the data, that he'll go and spend time with all the individuals that are interested in making sure we can see it and that we improve from it. And then finally, Carlos is incremental. He's all about, as I am as well, incremental gains. There is no such thing in our sport as one thing just fixes everything. It does not exist. It is about 1,000 small details just incrementally improving, and he's the master of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So obviously, end of the race, so close to a podium. Fifth and sixth and eighth. Sorry, fifth and eighth. We know your feelings post race now, but just to even have that finish right up at the top, in this, put it into perspective. When you have a triple header, you don't really have a lot of response time between now and Monaco, which is obviously such a different track. Is that part of your job as well, prioritizing right now?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's a job of not just myself, obviously, my senior leaders are here too. But here's the interesting thing. So everything we've got from Monaco, and we have some bits from Monaco, not necessarily visible, but we have some bits you need to always. I mean, you can't get around the hairpin in Monaco unless you do. That's the beauty of that track. And we have a front wing coming for Barcelona. There's an update. So there's a regulation change, and we have an update as well. But those were already in action months ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So my biggest job is actually making sure we're pointing towards what our future is. Because if we focus on these three races and only these three races, we'll fall back. So what we're really doing, and my main job, is making sure we're focused on all of the long-term projects that have to still kick in order for us to have success and continued success over multiple years. So I always talk about it, but the focus really is 26 for a lot of this organization now. Some looking ahead to 27 and 28 when they're doing projects that infrastructure building, systems that have to kick in by those dates. And that's how far forward we're thinking. And the beauty of our sport, compared to near enough any business in the world, is that every 2 weeks you get an assessment as to whether you're doing a good or a bad job.
Yeah,
that's the great thing. The difficult part of that is it's very hard to point you back into a 1 year or 2 years from now when you have that heartbeat just pulling you back to the now all the time. But again, that's what I love about our business, and against most other businesses, is it's not about profit or loss or how you're doing to your competitors once a year. It's that you put everything on the line every 2 weeks, but you've got to try and balance the organization in that long-term view. So my main job is that, really. It's making sure we get everything out that we can when I'm there, and then back here straight away, what are we doing about these projects that are in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? Where are they? And how do we bring them forward?
Yeah. On that note, very quickly about 26, obviously there's a reason the delta between the teams is so small now. The rules of, convergence over these last 5-6 years. 26 is going to lay it wide open again. Opportunity for teams that, Red Bull dominated at the beginning of this era. It could be you, it could be Aston Martin. I mean, that is the carrot, I'm sure, that is driving you every day.
You're spot on. And to manage expectations, I don't think it'll be us. I'd love it to be, but we have too much that's still not in the state that it should be in order to get it right for that session. We'll give it all. Don't get me wrong. That's not me saying for a minute we will back off. But I'm giving a realistic expectation that I still use the word giants, but there are giants in the sport. But you're spot on in your analogy. What 26 will do, and none of the teams can predict it. There's some postulation that people can predict it, but no one can predict it really. It will shake the order up. For a period of a year, there'll be some gaps between cars that we haven't had for a few years, and then you'll start to see it converge again, but probably quicker than we've ever converged before, because all teams are really investing quite significantly now.
Yeah. So there you are. You worked with Toto Wolff you were with Mercedes 20 years. I mean, you were there a long time. All of us, whatever your role in motorsport, as you say, you have to continually strive to get better. Drivers have to get better. In the team principal role, what did you really have to focus on? I know you're the smartest guy I've probably ever talked to, but I don't. But on a personal level, what did you go home when you knew you had the job and go to your partner and say, or yourself, I've really got to work on this if I want to be a success?
So thank you first of all for that kind comment. I'll give you an assurance. I'm definitely not the most intelligent person. I'm
Well,
really
you
good
haven't
at
seen
being-
my friends, James. They're pretty stupid. So
There we go. Perhaps. Everything. There's not one bit of me that I thought was at a championship level TP. And you've got to remember, I had the opportunity to be next to one of the greats who taught me a huge amount, but I could see where the gaps were as a result of it. What I like about team principles, though, is we have those. My background's more engineering. Toto's is more finance. The speciality doesn't matter as long as you bring strength into where you don't have that strength. So in the case of Toto, he needs engineering support to bring him up, and he does. In the case of me, I need to make sure I'm surrounding myself with business teams that are of the highest level to make sure I'm improving that area, that blind spot, should you will, that I have. I thought my communication was probably sensible. My ethics are there. What you see is what you get with me. Whether the camera was on right now or not, this is me. And I think that natural element actually helps me quite considerably, because it's just, I'm hyper competitive, I'm here to win, and I'm here to work with everyone that wants to be by my side while we do that. And that's a huge, I think, strength that has powered me through. The areas I absolutely had to improve on is Williams was not in the best state. Financially, we were fortunate we have Dalton that had been investing, but it was a team that really, because when you're at the back, everyone takes your good people to a certain extent. We still have great people here, but it was a little bit torn apart, a little bit more surviving than I would like it to be. And a set of skills I really had to learn is more what I would call merger and acquisition, where you've come into an entity and you've got to start finding what's good, what's bad, lay some foundations down. And you have to remember, at Mercedes, I was a part of a great team where our jobs were just to tune the last few milliseconds. So this was a completely different world to me, where you get the spade and shovel out and you start finding the foundations and then dig down to them. I had to learn those skills, and I was aware that I would have to learn those skills. I've had to learn a lot more about the holistic, how the car works together, not just the performance side of it. So in other words, how you build, where you go to in that. There's some other bits that I had the fortune of growing elsewhere, but I'll state this. I'd be disappointed if I'm ever not growing and learning. What drives me and motivates me is learning, and I'm doing that every day here. And I have to better myself, because I'm against others who are multiple world championships in this role, and I have a lot to improve and learn, and we have a lot to improve and learn. But that is me as my character. I get bored when I stay still, so it works perfectly.
And I think that is a quality that everybody up and down the pit lane, if they're good, needs that quality, right? You're always seeking. His dad told me to tell you this. He remembers in the mid-60s when Frank Williams was in a little Brabham, and Dad was in a Lotus. And that's when they first ran into each other. But at the time, we had a Christmas tree business. I don't know if you know this. And he would export the Christmas trees to like Sweden, but with the Cosworth engines underneath them. And Dad, he remembers Dad was like asked to go on a couple of trips with him, and he was like, no, I don't really need to smuggle engines abroad. But can you imagine, those were the days? And then Dad said, and by the way, tell him Frank still owes him money. So it's like from a drive he did.
I'm so sorry about that. Obviously, I'd love to help in that regard, but different owners now. None of that surprises. It's what I have learned since I've been here is I wish I'd overlapped with Frank a lot more.
Yeah.
I knew him in passing, but everything I'm learning in stories in between, he knew everyone here by name, knew their families, knew what was going on. People here would give him everything, because he's an inspirational leader. Yes, he had ways of working that perhaps are not how I operate, but I see why he took this to championship level.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally that he had a belief in his workforce, and his workforce had a belief in him at the same time, and he knew how to work the game. That was what was really impressive with him.
Yeah. And I think what's beautiful about our sport is you have Ferrari with Enzo, you have Bruce McLaren, you have Frank Williams, even though new ownership and obviously the family are long out of the team, but that legacy stays with you. It's still for generations of our generation. We remember the heydays, and I think that's very motivational. Before I let you go, let's talk about Monaco. You say, as you said, you're going there with some upgrades. It is all about qualifying. So how do you, as you say, managing expectations, What are you saying to the team? What are you saying to yourself going into this weekend?
So just to quantify the upgrades I'd more put as Monaco specific, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I suspect everyone will be in the same boat. What I'm saying to the team is, in Melbourne, and it was recorded, I said our new standard is we need to be fighting with both cars for points every single race weekend. That is the standard we need to adhere to before we turn the wheel. And it hasn't changed for Monaco. And I know we've had great success in Imola, but as you know, Monaco is one of those really tough events where getting two cars consistently into a point scoring position is tough. But that is the goal. And we have, I think, a platform that we can do it. We have to adapt faster than others. But it's no different for Monaco. It's no different for the races that come up beyond that point. We can't get caught away with how we have been operating, because other teams will add performance and the order will change, I'm sure, slightly. But our goal of that is operate cleanly. And really important is we are going to get things wrong. All teams do, but we will get things wrong. But this is a great year in order to have honest conversation with each other over, let's improve this, let's find this is what we need to have in the States. So as the car gets quicker and quicker, and as we are fighting teams that are really good at effectively their racing capability, we need to make sure we step up our game as well. So effectively, it's that continued journey for everyone involved.
Yeah. Well, last but not least, I was thinking about what to call this episode. Now, I came up with Revenge of the Nerds. Because you, in the nicest way possible, with all due respect, I'm sure that when you were finishing A-levels, going into engineering college, you did not think that you would have one of the highest profile jobs in the sport, with all the social media attention and everything that brings as an engineer. Quickly put that into perspective, that part of your life's journey.
Yeah, first of all, you're spot on. Not in my wildest dreams would I have thought I was there or here, finishing up, both going to university and before that point. And even for transparency, when I was working in Mercedes for all of those years, it was almost felt like an unreasonable and unrealistic goal. So it was not mine to have. And it only became reality when I walked through the door here. But my journey was university, did 2 different degrees. I did mathematics and computer science, not for any other reason. I was good at it. It was in the 90s. So I figured everyone would need some of that at some point. And then engineering, because I fell in love with the sport and wanted to be a part of it. And back then, teams were only 200, 300 people. So you had to have really some engineering discipline in order to be in and amongst teams. From then onwards, every job I could find in the team, I would take. I just wanted to keep. It's not quite true, but effectively, I worked in a mixture of vehicle dynamics, R&D, race engineering, form strategy, because it didn't exist back in 2002 when we were racing, and just was really happy to take on challenging projects because I couldn't get enough learning. And I'm confident that's what gave me the ability to have even a chance to get here today. The second chance obviously came around that I was fortunate to have some really great leaders around me. One of them was David Richards, one of them was Ross Bourne, one of them was Toto Wolff, who invested in me. So another one as well was Gilles Defra. I miss him terribly.
Me too.
He was a brilliant mentor all the way through, and he and I clicked as you knew him too. Yeah. It's easy to do. And they all formed me in who I am today, and I have little pieces of all of them that will stay with me forever. But I am my own individual, just taking what I think is good from each aspect of it and forming into myself.
That was a beautiful way to end this lovely conversation. James, have a great weekend. I know Monaco is a bun fight from start to finish, but it has its place on the calendar for a reason. And I'll be glued, as will everyone else. And I hope you have a great time. And hopefully see you in Austin, but maybe when you're in Las Vegas, we can get you in the studio.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin, and all the best to your dad as well. And thank you also to really all of your listeners. I hope that Williams is the team that you follow. We're a good organization. We're on the up.
I love it. All right. Take care, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Well, that was very insightful, wasn't it? And a real pleasure, especially put into context how much work they got on right now, getting ready for Monaco. So I truly appreciate everyone at Williams making that happen for us here on Drive to Win. Well, Monaco, as you just heard James talk about, brings a lot of different dynamics, and it's a unique situation. The goal's always the same. Remember last year, Charles Leclerc won at home, and it was a show of force by Ferrari. Can he do that again? Well, one lap pace isn't quite where they want it to be, but they are very good in tight, slow corners. But it all comes down to qualifying. And something tells me that I think Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari around the streets, his home streets of Monaco, I think he can probably do it. So I'm going to stick myself out there a little bit and say my predictions in qualifying is I think Leclerc will get pole. A long shot, but I'm going to go with it. I think they might mess it up during the race. But it's hard to mess it up if you're at the front. So why don't I throw it out there? I'm going to say Charles Leclerc in winner, Max second, and Lando third. That's it. No great science behind it, but I think Lando could be feeling pretty strong after last weekend. Well, anyway, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the Monaco Grand Prix as much as I will. I love the pageantry. I love the celebration of it around the streets of the Principality. It's really one of the most exciting weekends, but qualifying is the one to be glued to on Saturday. So don't miss that at all. Thank you so much to James Vowles, everyone at Williams for making it happen. And of course, to the Wynn Las Vegas for, as always, giving me a great home for Drive to Win. Take care, guys. See you next week.